Hey there, viewers. Some testimony is emotional, some is shocking, but this one came with receipts. Today, Usher took the stand and didn't just speak. He showed proof of what Diddy did to him and Justin Bieber. The courtroom hasn't been the same since. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The envelope. No one claimed. It was raining that morning. Not the kind of dramatic, stormy rain you see in movies. Just a dull, steady drizzle that made the city look like it hadn't slept. I remember how the windows of the records room fogged up early, before I'd even clocked in. The fluorescent lights buzzed above, flickering a little, like they always did in the East Wing. No one ever fixed them. I was alone in the basement level, sorting through routine filings and sealed exhibits. Most days were the same. 90% of what came in was boring. Procedural filings, old case requests, clerical mistakes, or resubmitted subpoenas with one letter corrected. My desk was wedged between two gray filing cabinets that had been there since the Clinton administration. They still had labels from past cases, faded now, but I'd memorized some of the numbers just from habit. I had just sat down with a cup of burnt coffee when I noticed the envelope. It wasn't there before. That slot in the wall, we called it the ghost slot, was only ever used by staff when they didn't want something logged through the official intake upstairs. Normally it would be flagged, but this time no alert went off, no courier signature, no surveillance trigger. Just a thick manila envelope resting against the wall like it had placed itself there. No markings, no return address, just one word written in blocky Sharpie. I stared at it longer than I probably should have. My first instinct was to toss it into the incident bin, where we put weird mail, loose flash drives, or anything anonymous that could be deemed tampered evidence. But something about this one made my fingers curl when I picked it up. It wasn't just thick, it was dense, like it had things inside that were never meant to be light. I peeled the flap open carefully. No powder. No ticking. I half joked about those things in my head, but we'd had scare mail before. The air around me felt colder as I slid the contents out. A single USB drive, a printed letter typed and unsigned, and 5 black and white photographs. Scans, clearly of older prints. The letter wasn't long. No heading, no government seal, no signature, just plain Times New Roman text on white paper, like someone had typed it in a rush at a library terminal. This material pertains to the federal investigation into Sean Combs and affiliated persons of interest. Please cross-section with international travel logs of listed minors between 2008 to 010 and compare with recording studio schedules during the same period. Visual and auditory evidence included. This is not a duplicate. Please act accordingly. That was it, nothing else. I looked at the photos next. Grainy, definitely old. One showed a hallway, fancy, maybe a hotel, with a velvet runner and ornate trim, the kind you see in Vegas or LA penthouses. In another, a young man, possibly in his late teens, was walking with a taller figure wearing a hoodie. No faces were clear, but one photo had been marked with red pen, a circle around a blurred face and a name scribbled underneath. Then scribbled out. Only the initials remained. Say. That made me stop. I didn't jump to conclusions. I'm not one of those conspiracy nuts who sees a blurry photo and screams cover up, but I knew those initials. Everyone did. The USB sat heavy on my desk. Black casing, no brand, just one scratched label on the back, clip_A13. I plugged it into the offline terminal, the one reserved for non-networked viewing. I ran a quick scan, no malware. Just a single MP4 file, dated October 12, 2009. The footage started with static. Then it steadied into a wide-angle shot of a hallway. The same hallway as the photo. The image shook a bit, like it had been recorded by hand. I saw figures walking down the corridor. Two boys, one in a backwards cap, the other wearing sunglasses indoors. Behind them, a man in a white t-shirt held what looked like a phone or a camera, following close. I squinted at the faces. The cap was tilted, but I caught a flash of something familiar in the profile. The smaller boy turned his head for a second, for just a frame, maybe less. His face was visible. It was young, smooth, caught mid-laugh, but the eyes were tired. There was something about that smile, polite, practiced. The man behind him said something. The audio was poor, muffled and distorted, but I could make out parts. Not to talk about what happens in the room, right? There was laughter. One of the boys replied, but the mic didn't catch it. Then the footage cut off. I sat there for a long time, staring at the blank screen. My heart wasn't pounding. It wasn't fear. Not yet. It was something slower, heavier, like watching a glass slowly slide toward the edge of a table. You know what's coming, but you don't move to stop it. I'd seen packets like this before. Not often, but enough. Anonymous drops, sealed tips. But most of those were garbage. Unverified claims, conspiracy theories, people desperate to insert themselves into a high-profile investigation. But this one felt different. I looked back at the photos. One of them had a date scribbled on the corner. NYC, Jan 2010. That was around the time of a major industry event. I pulled up the travel logs database on the second screen, checked who was flying in and out of LaGuardia that week. The initials matched. I should have stopped there. I should have logged the package as is and sent it up the chain. But something in me said, wait, not out of recklessness, out of habit, because too many things, too many real things, had disappeared from the files when they were sent upstairs. I remembered a case 2 years ago, a woman sent in tapes alleging abuse tied to a producer out west. She included timestamps, audio, names. I saw the package myself. 2 days later, it was gone. Not reassigned, not investigated. Gone. When I asked about it, I was told it had never existed. I learned then silence isn't always about negligence. Sometimes it's maintenance. So, I made a choice. I slid 4 of the photos back into the envelope. I placed the USB in the evidence pouch and sealed it. I wrote the intake report, filed it under Unverified Submission, Category B, pending authentication. But the 5th photo, the one with the circled face and the scribbled initials, I kept. It's not protocol, I know that. I've never done anything like that before. But this felt like the kind of thing that disappears if too many people see it too soon. I tucked it behind a loose panel in my locker, beneath a pile of old case notes and cafeteria coupons, somewhere no one would look. I don't know why I kept it. Maybe I needed to see it again later. Maybe I wanted proof that I wasn't imagining it. Maybe I was just tired of watching everything slip through the cracks. The next morning, I got an email from my supervisor. Subject, for retip. Message, received your intake report. Routing packet to Federal Review. Thanks for discretion. That was it. No questions, no follow-up, no sign anyone had even watched the footage. I wanted to ask, but I didn't. He learned not to ask. That photo still haunts me. Not because of what it shows, but because of what it doesn't. The blur, the uncertainty, the way it dares you to fill in the blanks with what you already suspect. Every day since, I've asked myself the same question. If the initials weren't there, would I have still known who it was? I think I would have. Chapter 2, House of Mirrors. I wasn't always ashamed of the work I did. In fact, back in 2010, I was proud of it. Custom interiors, luxury remodels, bespoke spaces for clients who wouldn't bat an eye at a six-figure retainer. It was the kind of portfolio most designers only dream about. I had done lounges in Vegas, penthouses in Manhattan, even one underground cigar room in Dubai shaped like a serpent's spine. That was my world. I didn't ask too many questions. If the checks cleared and the vision was clear, I delivered. That's how I ended up at the property on Ridgemont Drive. It didn't come through the usual channels. No studio referral, no agency bidding, just a voice on the phone. Male, deep, calm. He said he was calling on behalf of Mr. Combs and that they needed someone who could handle non-traditional spatial aesthetics. His words, not mine. The NDA arrived before I'd even agreed to the job. It was thick, ironclad, with clauses about non-disclosure, non-disparagement, and a curious section labeled visual restrictions. I remember staring at that page for a while. It said, plainly, that any observations made on the premises that were not directly relevant to the project must be neither documented nor discussed. That should have been my first sign. Still, the offer was double my usual rate, and they wired half the payment before I even stepped on site. The house itself sat tucked behind high hedges and security gates, perched like a shrine in the Hollywood Hills. It had that cold modern feel, all sharp angles and tinted glass. But it wasn't the usual showcase property. This one felt hidden. Even the landscaping seemed designed to obscure it from above. I met a man at the door who never gave his name, just wore a gray shirt, earpiece, and nodded when I said mine. He walked me through the main house quickly, no small talk, no stops. Just a fast pace down a hallway until we reached a set of frosted glass doors that opened into a completely unfinished wing. Entertainment lounge, he said. No windows, no light leaks. Soundproofing mandatory, and Mr. Combs wants full wall surveillance, all internal. The space was about 1,200 square feet, concrete floors, no drywall yet, just studs and wiring. I asked about the layout. He wants a single chair in the center, facing a curved wall, 12 vertical panels, all one-way mirrors. That's when I asked, half joking, if this was for some kind of art installation. The man didn't laugh. He just replied, "It's for privacy and security." The instructions were specific: velvet paneling, ceiling mirrors, ambient red backlighting controlled via remote. I was told to install a single entrance with a privacy lockout feature, meaning once the door closed from the inside, no one could override it unless they had the code. No exterior access, no windows, no exit other than the way you came in. It took 3 weeks to complete. I didn't bring in my usual crew. They insisted on hand-picking contractors, 2 framers, an electrician, and an AV guy I'd never met before. They all worked silently, like they'd done it before. By the second week, I stopped asking questions. The air inside the build began to feel thick, not physically, but psychologically. The space had no ventilation yet, but it still seemed like it held its breath. I'd walk in and feel watched, even when no one was there. The chair arrived on a Friday. It was delivered in a black crate labeled simply Asset 9. Custom upholstery, crimson velvet, oversized armrests, deeply padded back. It looked like a throne, and a therapist's chair had a child. I didn't watch them install the internal cameras. They handled that after hours. But the next morning, when I returned, the LED indicators were lit, faint red dots tucked just behind the mirror seams. I checked the wiring out of habit. The feeds didn't run to the main security system. They routed to a standalone unit embedded in the wall. No internet access, no cloud sync, only internal recording storage on. I finished my part the next afternoon. The man in the gray shirt met me outside and handed me an envelope. It was more than I expected. Cash. I'd never been paid that much off books before. He looked me in the eye and said, You were never here. Later that night, I returned to the site once more to collect my tools. That's when I saw the van. It wasn't a production truck or a rental. It was a private transport vehicle, dark gray, no logos. It pulled up quietly through the rear entrance. A staffer I hadn't seen before stepped out and opened the side door. 2 young men stepped out. One looked older, mid-20s maybe. The other was younger, definitely under 18. He wore a hoodie that nearly swallowed him and carried a duffel bag that looked too heavy for him. Behind them came a third figure, slim, stylish, sunglasses on despite the night. He looked familiar, too familiar. It took me a second to place him. Usher. He was arguing with one of the staff. Low voice, intense. I couldn't make out the words, but his gestures were sharp, not violent, but upset, protective. The younger boy stood off to the side, not saying anything, just watching them with a kind of blankness I've never forgotten. I stayed hidden behind the trellis wall and watched them disappear inside through the side door. The lock clicked shut behind them. I left quietly. I didn't go back. For years, I told myself it was just a strange job, an eccentric request, rich people building weird rooms. LA was full of stories like that. I didn't think about it again, not seriously, until last week. A friend of mine in the legal system sent me a screenshot, just a low-res image, blurry, grayscale, a photograph, part of a court leak. He knew I'd worked properties in LA and wanted my opinion. It was the room, the mirrored wall, the chair, the red lighting. It was unmistakable. My heart dropped. I remembered the boy with the duffel bag, the way Usher had looked, like someone trying to put out a fire that hadn't started yet. The man in gray telling me I was never there. And now this, years later, the image of that very room ending up as evidence in a federal case. I haven't spoken to anyone else about it. Not until now. I don't want attention. I'm not here to make accusations or play hero, but I need someone to know. I built that room. I saw who walked into it, and I never stopped wondering what happened after the door locked. The custody weekend. The footage always bothered me. Not the public clip, the one everyone saw where Diddy grins at the camera and says he's got custody of Justin Bieber for the weekend. That was just strange on the surface. Celebrities say bizarre things all the time. But I've been in this industry long enough to know when something's off beneath the surface. When the tone doesn't match the body language. When the words feel rehearsed and the eyes say something else entirely. I've watched that video more times than I care to admit. At first, it was just morbid curiosity, then professional habit, but now it's something else. Obsession? Maybe. Or just the slow burn of a question I can't stop asking. What really happened that weekend? My workspace isn't glamorous. People hear investigative journalist and picture boardrooms or bustling newsrooms with editors yelling across desks. Mine is a converted garage in Van Nuys, stacked with labeled bins, yellowed folders, and a 2010 Dell Tower running editing software that crashes if you look at it wrong. The walls are covered in sticky notes and photos. A dry erase board holds 3 timelines at once. One for Diddy, one for Usher, one for Bieber. I've spent the last 2 weeks combing through everything related to that 2009 custody weekend. Every interview, every press clip, every fan-captured video or half-glimpsed tabloid photo that shows where they were and who they were with. You'd be amazed how much you can build from crumbs if you know where to look. The original footage aired in early October 2009. Diddy's tone is playful, sure. But there's a moment right after he says, "I have custody of Justin Bieber for 48 hours, where Justin glances off camera. It's not just a flick of the eye, it's a freeze, like he's waiting for a signal. His jaw tenses. His smile falters for half a second. I slowed that frame down until it looked like a still photo. I played it on loop. Things not right. In another segment of the same clip, they're riding in a car. Diddy talks about going to get some girls. Justin, just 15, nods awkwardly. It's supposed to come off as lighthearted. The rite of passage. But it doesn't feel like a joke. It feels scripted, practiced, like Justin had been told how to respond. Say this, smile then. I pulled the audio into a waveform editor. Nothing fancy, just enough to separate background noise from vocals. There's a segment where the bass is low enough that a voice comes through clearer in the right channel. Not Diddy's, it's distorted. The mic wasn't aimed at him. But you can just make out. Don't say the chair thing. That's between us. What chair? I didn't know what it meant at the time. But the phrasing, between us? That's not something you say about a joke. That's something you say when someone has seen something they're not supposed to talk about. I started tracing the timeline. October 8th, 2009. Bieber flies into New York. October 9th, spends the day with Diddy. Multiple fans report sightings at a recording studio uptown. October 10th, Usher is seen leaving a meeting at Def Jam. No sign of Bieber, no confirmation of who Bieber was with that night. October 11th, a red carpet event. Diddy shows up alone. Bieber is spotted briefly at the after-party, looking pale. No media interviews, no social posts. Usher did a radio interview the following week. When asked why he wasn't with Bieber for the whole tour rollout, he said something I've now listened to 50 times. I let Puff take over for a minute. He wanted to give Justin the real experience. That line has never sat right with me. The real experience? What does that mean? And then came the breakthrough. A source I'd spoken with years ago, a former PR assistant from the label, finally responded to one of my messages. No formal interview, just a brief email. Check HR logs from August 2009. Internal complaint. Assistant flagged concern about minor supervision during studio time. Nothing came of it. I spent 3 days trying to verify that lead. Most of the label's internal documents from that area were wiped after their merger, but I had a contact in data preservation who helped me retrieve a backup server file. Not the complaint itself, but the metadata index of reports filed that month. Sure enough, there it was. Date, October 10, 2009. Filed by redacted. Title, Concerns Ray Studio Minors, Inadequate Chaperoning. Status, closed, no action taken. No full report, no attached details. Just a redacted summary that proved someone close had raised a red flag about that very weekend. I sat there in the dark that night, listening to the rain tap against the garage roof, staring at the redacted line on my screen. I tried to imagine what they saw, what they heard, what made them speak up, and what made them stop. The final piece came unexpectedly. I was digging through old web archives, forgotten forums, fan pages, message boards, long shut down. One of my tools scraped content from a now-defunct site called Starbridge. It had once been a hub for fan theories and tabloid leaks. Buried deep in a 2011 thread, I found a user post under the name Mirror Room 9, just 5 lines. The weekend you all love was the weekend we all missed. I was there. Not inside, but I saw the van. Mild when they walked in, but not when they came out. They don't remember it the same way. That's how the story survives. If you know what happened that weekend, you'd never sing along to those early tracks again. The account had no other posts, no user data. But the phrasing, not inside but I saw the van, it gave me chills. Because I knew about the van. I'd read whispers in other reports, seen half references in other leak documents. One driver who vanished mid-tour, another assistant who took a leave and never returned. That post wasn't some kid playing internet sleuth. It was someone who had seen something, someone who knew what the weekend really meant. I sat there, staring at my wall of notes and faces and pushpins. Every trail I followed led to silence. Every statement had a twin, a moment where the truth should have emerged but instead curled back into shadow. And at the center of it all was that 48-hour window. A lost weekend wrapped in smiles and cameras and carefully rehearsed lines. Custody, Diddy had said, like Justin was a possession, like he was borrowed or claimed, not mentored, not protected, not raised. Oh, I don't know if anyone will ever come forward with the full story. I don't know if Usher remembers what happened, or if Justin has buried it so deep he barely knows it's there. But I know what I've seen. I know what the footage shows between the edits. I know what the metadata hides beneath the surface. And I know that weekend wasn't just weird. It was orchestrated. Z Knowledge Medicine. Chapter 4. Usher's Return. They told me I wouldn't know who I'd be sketching. Said the witness's name wasn't for me to hear, not in the briefing, not even after the session. They emphasized that I wasn't there to listen. Just to draw. Capture the essence, they said. Keep it quiet, keep it neutral. I've worked trials for over 20 years. Seen murderers, victims, corporate sharks, weeping mothers, cartel snitches. I've sketched monsters with expensive haircuts and saints with trembling hands. Nothing surprises me anymore, or so I thought. The session was held in a closed chamber. No press, no gallery, no jury. Just one judge, a federal clerk, 2 government attorneys, and me, seated behind a plexiglass divider with a sketch pad and 3 sharpened pencils. The lights were soft in there, more like a chapel than a courtroom. No windows, no echoes. Bieber walked in slowly, escorted by a marshal. Didn't look left or right, just kept his chin low, hands clasped. The room changed when he entered. Not louder, not heavy, just different. Like a reel of film clicking into place. The judge didn't call him by name, just nodded and said, "Whenever you're ready." But I knew who it was. Usher. Not the 19-year-old boy with the billboard smile and silk voice. Not the dancer. Not the icon. This was a man. Older. Shoulders tight with memory. Eyes dark, not from makeup, but from too many nights spent pretending. He didn't see what he saw. He sat with his back straight, but not confident. It was more like he was holding himself up out of obligation. His left hand trembled slightly, and I could tell he was trying to keep it from the camera. I started sketching in broad strokes, focusing on his posture first, the angle of his jaw. But the room was silent for almost a full minute before he spoke. "I was 13 when I moved in," he said. Diddy had this place. Big house. I thought it was paradise. Studios in the basement, chef on call. Night always felt like morning there. Lights never went out. No one interrupted. No one asked him to clarify. He wasn't reading a statement. He wasn't crying. He was just releasing. I used to lie in bed at night and hear laughter through the walls, men's voices, heavy music. Sometimes it sounded like a party, sometimes it didn't. He paused there, not to build suspense. This wasn't performance. It was like he was sorting through too many memories at once. Palmed night. I went down to get water. I heard voices in the hallway. Not angry, just tense. I turned the corner and saw 2 men leaving a room. Behind them was a boy, couldn't have been older than me, wrapped in a towel. He didn't look up. I stopped drawing. My pencil had hovered midline, as if my hand forgot how to move. The court reporter's keystrokes were the only sound besides Usher's voice. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe they were just hanging out. I wanted to believe that. When you're that young and someone that powerful says you're family, you believe them. He opened a small envelope and slid a USB across the table. A marshal picked it up with gloves and handed it to the government tech in the corner. No one played it, not yet, but the label was handwritten. Just 3 words. Studio never aired. The judge leaned forward and asked, "Can you describe what's on it?" Usher nodded. Voicemails. Calls I recorded, some conversations from back then. I started recording things when I stopped trusting people. There's also music, not released stuff, just demo tracks. Stuff Justin laid down during that weekend. You can hear it in his voice. He wasn't singing, he was surviving. That phrase, he wasn't singing, he was surviving. It stayed with me. I scribbled it on the edge of my sketchpad, not to draw it, but to remember how he said it. Flat. Final. Without blame, but not without grief. He talked about Justin like a brother, not with nostalgia, but with regret. Like someone who watched a storm and didn't know how to stop it. I found him once in a booth, middle of the night, no engineer, no notes, just him in a loop, crying, not bawling, just these quiet, broken sounds. I walked in, asked him what happened. He said, "I don't want to be good anymore if good means being quiet." I didn't know what he meant at the time. I thought he was being dramatic, but now I know. One of the attorneys looked up, about to speak, but the judge waved it off. "Let him finish," she said. Usher looked down at his hands. His fingers kept flexing, like they were trying to shake off something that wasn't there. I said mentorship was sacred. That's what they told me. That it was love, that it was protection, that it was building the next generation. But I saw too many kids leave those rooms with their voices shaking. That was when he finally looked up, not at the judge, not at the attorneys, but at me. I don't know why. Maybe because I was the only person in the room not taking anything from him, just giving something back. A face. A shape. A witness. His eyes locked with mine, and for a second, the sketchpad felt like a shield I didn't deserve to hold. He said nothing else after that. The judge thanked him. The attorneys offered no further questions. He was escorted out the same way he came in. Quiet, contained, unseen by the world outside. I finished the sketch alone in the antechamber. Added the shading around his eyes, drew the slight tension in his shoulders, skipped the tears because there weren't any. Just wait. After I turned in the drawing, I went out the side exit and sat on the courthouse steps, lit a cigarette I hadn't smoked in 4 years. Some testimonies are loud, some try to shock. This one didn't need to. It just peeled back a curtain we've all known was there, but kept walking past. I don't know what was on that USB. I don't know if the voices will be clear or if the songs will be enough to shift the case. But I know what I saw. I saw a man who had finally decided to stop singing and start speaking. The manager who left too soon. They say you can't outrun the past, but I sure as hell tried. I've been living out here in the woods of southern Oregon for over a decade now. No neighbors for at least 2 miles. No phone tower within signal range. Just me, the trees, and a battered cassette recorder I've used more than I care to admit. Not for music anymore, but for memory. For documentation. Because sometimes the only way I trust myself to remember something right is to say it out loud and play it back the next day. My name isn't what it used to be. I burned that along with everything else when I walked away from the industry in 2011. Back then, I was one of the youngest road managers to ever tour with a platinum artist. Justin was on fire, global, untouchable. I was responsible for day-to-day logistics, Hotels, schedules, studio times, media appearances, and making sure the machine ran smooth. And it did. Until that one weekend in Miami. I haven't spoken about it since. Not really. A few fragments and a drunken voicemail to an old friend. One scribbled letter I never mailed. But now, after everything that's coming out, the raids, the testimonies, the footage, I can't keep pretending that what I saw was nothing. It was supposed to be a routine trip. 2 days, quick press blitz, some recording time, and then back to LA. Diddy's team handled the accommodations. They told us it was for strategic exposure, that Justin would benefit from being seen with certain VIPs. Usher was already set to fly in too. I remember thinking it was all being done fast. Too fast and too quietly. No promotional rollout, no schedule announcements. Just a private jet and an NDA I hadn't seen before, labeled Event Chaperone Protocol. They called it a compound, but it was more like a fortress. Gated property somewhere north of downtown Miami, nestled behind a long tree-lined drive. When we arrived, the security was unusually tight. Phones were taken at the gate, luggage scanned. Even Justin's backpack was searched. And I remember the way he looked at me when they unzipped it, like he wanted me to say something. But I didn't. Inside, it was lavish. Mirrors, soft lighting, velvet furniture everywhere, like someone had tried to make it feel expensive and seductive at the same time. But there was something else, something off. I've worked hundreds of gigs. I've seen luxury. This wasn't that. This was curated discomfort. Too perfect, too quiet, like a place that had practiced what it looked like when the cameras were on. Except there were no real cameras. Just one crew. 3 guys I'd never seen before, with shoulder rigs and boom mics. No production tags, no studio IDs. When I asked who they were shooting for, one of them just smiled and said, "Private content per Puff's direction." That was the first time I felt the itch in my chest, the one I now know as a warning. They split us up that night. I was told to wait in the guest quarters with some of the other crew, while Justin and Usher were taken elsewhere, supposedly to rehearse something, but no rehearsals happened, no sound checks, no stylists, just absence. It wasn't until later, maybe past midnight, that I realized something was wrong. One of the waitstaff, a woman in her late 20s, brushed past me while clearing glasses. She didn't look like the rest of the catering crew. Too tense. Too deliberate. She slipped a folded napkin into my hand, under a tray. Inside it were 6 words, scrawled in a rushed, uneven hand. "He's not okay. Watch the chair." That's all it said. I still have it. Folded, faded, edges curled from being reread too many times. I didn't know what to do. No one would talk to me directly. When I asked about Justin, I was told he was getting mentored. When I asked about Usher, I was told he left early. I checked the guest wing cameras. The security guy on duty let me take a peek. And that's when I saw Justin. Alone, sitting in a red velvet chair in a circular mirrored room. He looked small. Not physically, but emotionally. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at the wall. There were people in the room. Older men, suited, one with sunglasses indoors. One of them handed Justin something, and though I couldn't see what it was, his shoulders tensed. The feed cut out seconds later. That was the last time I ever saw him like that. When they brought him back to the room I was in, he didn't say anything, just handed me his hoodie and curled up on the couch. I covered him with a throw blanket, tried to act normal. But then, as I was getting ready to leave, he handed me something without looking up. It was another napkin. He said I should smile even if it hurts. But it really hurts. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat in the hallway trying to decide what to do. I felt useless, complicit. afraid. Because I knew, deep in my bones, that something had happened behind those mirrored walls that no one wanted on record. The next morning, we were flown out early. No press tour, no interviews, just silence. A week later, I was pulled into a meeting at the label's West Coast office and told I'd be receiving a severance package. Creative restructuring, they called it. I signed the papers, I took the money, I disappeared. For years, I told myself I had no proof, that I couldn't help, that I was just a small cog in a very big machine. But that woman, the one who gave me the first napkin, I tried to track her down, asked around, reached out to other staffers. No one remembered her name. No one had a photo. One guy, a driver, said she stopped showing up to events after 2012. Gone. Like smoke. I know I could be imagining pieces of this. Trauma does that. But I've seen enough now, the stories, the leaks, the survivors finally speaking to know that what I saw was real. The chair was real. The mirrored room was real. And the pain in Justin's eyes that night wasn't imagination. It was instruction. It was survival. I don't want credit for this. I'm not a hero. I stayed quiet too long. But someone else needs to know. Someone who can't be bought off or erased. That weekend should have ended a career. Should have ended an empire. Instead, it became a template. And we all kept the machine running. Chapter 6. The day Oprah's team cleaned house. I was trained to preserve stories, not erase them. Back then, I worked deep below the main building, a vault-level content facility most people didn't even know existed. If you were on the visitor's tour, you saw the clean, polished archive room lined with inspirational posters and plaques, but behind the reinforced doors, past the keypad-controlled elevator and triple-auth walls, was the real library. No windows, in just rows of black tape cases, some labeled in Sharpie, others in embossed foil, and all part of a collection the public would never fully see. It was late 2013 when the first order came in. It didn't arrive through email or memo. It came as a printout, folded once, slid across the table by someone from what we always called the executive floor. That was code. We never said names. The instruction was simple. Purge all content featuring minors from the legacy mentorship segments between 199-82011. Prioritize subjects under 18 at time of filming. Begin with guests listed below. There were 10 names on that list. I only remember 3 with clarity. Justin Bieber, Usher, Sean Combs. No one used the word delete. In fact, the order specified that everything must be sealed, not destroyed. Tagged for external compliance reassignment and boxed in nondescript gray bins. The kind used for props, not archival material. I handled it myself, not because I was told to, but because something about the whole process made me uncomfortable. I didn't want to trust it to interns. I pulled each segment manually, scanning the tapes as they loaded into the system one final time. Some were short 5-minute interviews, others were more involved, long-format couch conversations, unscripted backroom chatter recorded during what were marketed as authentic behind-the-scenes mentorship dialogues. The one that stuck with me most was a segment called Red Couch Sessions, Youth in Motion. It was shot in 2009, 3 cameras, studio lighting, soft jazz playing in the background. The guests were listed on the tape jacket as Usher, Justin, Puff. Informal rap segment. Boxed that one with the others, labeled it, scanned it out. But when the shipment list printed, something didn't match. Tape number 4317B had no barcode. The system marked it as non-existent record. I flagged it, but before I could rescan, someone from upstairs called. Told me to log it manually. Some files were pulled in advance, they said. just mark it compliant. So I did. But when I returned to the vault after hours, I had a key. I always had a key. I couldn't stop thinking about that clip. The label had been handwritten, the only one like that in the entire set. No foil tag, no watermark, just red ink on white tape. I slid it into one of the spare decks and hit play. It opened mid-laugh. Justin sat between Usher and Diddy on a bright red couch. The mood was casual, but the smile on Justin's face didn't look real. You know that look. Too big, too fast. The kind of smile that waits for permission before it fades. Usher's body was angled toward Justin protectively, but his hand tapped his knee rhythmically. Anxious. Diddy, on the other side, leaned in a little too close. The conversation was surface level at first, about music, growth, becoming a man. Then a voice off camera said something. Let's not mention the chair again. He still remembers. The mic didn't pick up who said it, but both Usher and Justin turned toward the source at the same time. Justin's smile vanished for just a second, long enough for it to be real. Diddy chuckled and said something like, that was a special weekend, huh? But no one responded. Then the clip cut. Not like an edit, but like it had been manually stopped. I stared at the screen for a long time. There was no date stamp, no archive signature, no preservation tag. This clip wasn't meant to be there. I should have reported it, logged it, burned it maybe. But I didn't. I copied it, encrypted it, and sent a digital copy to a P.O. box I found on a legal database, registered anonymously, to a federal complaint liaison. I never heard back. Didn't expect to. Over the years, I kept track of what we lost. Not what was destroyed, but what was buried. Stories that were never told, not because they were lies, but because they were inconvenient truths. The kind that make powerful people uncomfortable. We weren't asked to lie, just to reorganize memory, shape legacy, control narrative. A year later, the mentorship series was quietly scrubbed from syndication. Most people assumed it was because the show had run its course, but inside, we knew. The past was being boxed before anyone could ask the wrong questions. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if that clip had aired, if the wrong person saw it. Or the right one. Sometimes I wonder if that boy on the couch ever forgot what they told him not to talk about. But most days, I don't wonder. I remember. They never touched the flame. But they did pass the candle, and what it lit was too much to bury. The playback room. The terminal in Lab 7 has no network access, no Bluetooth, no cloud ports, just cold metal, static shielding, and a wall of reinforced soundproofing that hums faintly if you press your ear against it. The kind of room built not to keep people out, but to keep the truth in. I've sat in this room longer than I'd like to admit. 12 years in cyber forensics under Homeland, most of it combing through hard drives from fraud cases, identity theft rings, cartel comms. Nothing prepared me for this case. They called it Exhibit U, a sealed USB drive labeled in black marker, studio, never aired. It came through the court under special protections, handed off with chain of custody logs over 3 pages long. Origin, testimony, chamber. Source, a witness identified only as C.W. Artist, Class A. The moment I slid the drive into the offline workstation, I knew this wasn't like the others. It wasn't just audio files. It was a web. Dozens of short clips, some just seconds long, others several minutes. No timestamps, no folders, just raw, disorganized data. Voice memos, voicemail dumps, studio mic pickups, room tone captures, even layered project stems. The software processed it over 20 minutes. No metadata tags, scrubbed clean. Whoever handed this over didn't want their footprints anywhere near it. But there were signatures embedded in the waveform structures. Tiny fragments of background hums, power line static, even hard drive clicks. That's how you build a picture. From the things people don't mean to leave behind. The first clip was banal. A phone call, Usher speaking to someone about rescheduling a rehearsal. Nothing strange. Just industry chatter. The second, a voice memo. Justin's voice, younger, higher pitched, talking about how weird it is to stay up past midnight with the big guys. I logged them without reaction. Procedure first, curiosity second. The third file changed everything. It was a studio pickup. Mono, faint reverb. You could hear two people, not clearly in frame. One was definitely Justin. The other was harder to place. Justin whispered, "Can I leave now?" Then, desperation and despair. It's making the slow longer. The tension dully, a terrible feeling. Despair, Carter thought. To what end it will come. I ought to go the longer tense separate, he thought. To what end it will come. The second voice, older, replied, "We're not here for that. Don't bring the others." The tone wasn't angry, it was mechanical, like someone reading a script. I stopped the playback, wrote the event marker. Exhibit U, clip 3. Code 4BVA Studio, mic feed A. Keywords, can I leave now? Don't bring the others. Traffic. Flag, potential coercion. Location, unidentified. Subject, under 18. The fourth file was shorter, just ambient noise. Faint footsteps, a cough. The unmistakable sound of velvet brushing against leather. A chair, possibly. But the fifth clip made the room feel colder. I played it once, then again, then twice more, with headphones. It was a binaural field recording, captured inside a room with mirrored acoustics. You can hear the subtle high-end reflections, the dampened mid-range. A sound engineer would know instantly. This wasn't a studio. It was something else, a constructed chamber. A single voice enters. "We give you the light. You just have to carry it for a while. That's all. Smile." No names. No identifiers, just that voice, like a teacher explaining a lesson. Rehearsed, reassuring, chilling. Then footsteps. The sound of someone shifting in a chair, possibly pacing. Then silence, heavy, absent. I ran the frequency analysis. There were multiple audio fingerprints under the main channel, layered, buried. Someone had edited this to keep only certain frequencies visible, but they missed something. In the left channel, at 6.2 mH, there's a faint tremor. A voice, younger, almost inaudible. And it still hurts. I didn't realize I'd clenched my fists until I heard the knuckles pop. I cataloged the entire set, 41 audio clips, 12 flagged for psychological review, 3 tagged as high priority for exploitation assessment. I built a chain index by ambient markers. You can track the room tone shifts and time of day changes. And that's when I noticed a pattern. Every file marked with Usher's initials corresponded to recording sessions with studio logs that never made it to the official label archives. Sessions booked off record, after houses with equipment not registered to any label. None of them had a file name I hadn't noticed earlier. Chairroom_demo2. I didn't play that one, not yet. Instead, I wrote my summary, line by line, cold, clinical. Case tag, HSD 2187F, Combs Private Archive Minors Mentorship Claims. Analyzed DD Labs Federal Forensics Level 4. Contents: audio evidence suggesting grooming, coercion, unauthorized off-record studio sessions involving minors. Subject: rejected. Potential connections to UMG, Bad Boy, private mentorship programs. Priority Class 1 cultural exploitation / minor endangerment / multi-party systemic consent violations. Summary: case not just about Combs, case is about the system that handed him the matches. I saved the file, logged the drive into the burn archive, double-sealed it with tamper-proof tape. Then I shut the terminal down. Outside the lab, no one asks questions. They don't want to know what we hear in here. They want codes, clearance, boxes checked. They don't want to sit with the weight of a whisper that says, "It still hurts." But I sat with it, because someone has to. The names they whispered. It didn't end the way people thought it would. There was no gavel slam, no headline, no public unsealing of charges. The final docket was filed in silence, behind closed doors, inside a federal room where the windows were frosted over even from the inside. Some said it was still ongoing. Others said the case had been buried. Not lost, just shelved, preserved like a fossil under polished concrete. But the tremor was real. You could feel it in the quiet places, not in courtrooms, but in the cracks between songs on the radio, the long pauses during award shows, the missing names on festival lineups. You could feel it in the absence. Usher disappeared from the spotlight first. 1 month after his testimony, his team announced a creative sabbatical. No statement, no interviews. His social feeds went dark except for one post, a photograph of a record player playing silence. The caption read, "Not every sound is meant to be heard, but some are never unspoken." Justin was seen weeks later in a church parking lot in Ontario, hands clasped, eyes shut, head bowed. The video was grainy, filmed from too far away to read his lips, but you could tell he wasn't just praying, he was remembering, or trying not to. In the lower levels of the federal courthouse, a clerk filed a tape into evidence under the name Anonymous Submission Echo 44. She never heard what was on it. She just labeled it and slid it into a metal drawer, beside dozens of other drives that would likely never see the light. But someone did hear it. It started as a whisper, a looped audio file passed anonymously through a series of accounts, eventually landing in a message board that hadn't seen traffic since 2015. It was only 33 seconds long. No intro, no credits, just static. And then, faint voices. Too layered to identify clearly, but too deliberate to ignore. A list of names, spoken. One after another, not in anger, not in accusation, just whispered. Some claimed it was AI generated, that the names were digitally reconstructed from public rosters, but others disagreed, said the breath patterns were too real, that one voice was unmistakably young, that one of the names didn't belong on any list because that name had never been public. No charges followed the leak, no officials responded to questions, but the names began to echo, quietly, in locker rooms, in green rooms, in whispered hallway conversations between artists who suddenly stopped, shaking hands the way they used to. A studio on the West Coast shuttered without notice, just a single velvet chair left behind in the middle of an empty soundstage. Someone posted a picture of it, dust-covered, surrounded by black walls, a single microphone cable still plugged into the floor jack. Caption: "We don't record there anymore. The room remembers." At an East Coast media archive, a clerk found a mislabeled tape filed under Inventory Lost Originals. No barcode, no timestamp, just a sticky note. "Watch alone. Don't rewind." She never said what she saw on it. But she quit the next day, told her supervisor she wanted to work with books again, said history was quieter there. Survivor support hotlines reported a slight uptick in calls that month, nothing dramatic, but one was flagged. "Boo. Girl, young, calm." She said, "He told me to look in the mirror and forget what I saw. Oh, but I still see it." The call ended before the handler could ask who he was. Back in the vault, someone found a copy of the leaked audio, not a file, but a burned CD. It was left inside an envelope marked only with a line. "They didn't just use us. They rehearsed it over and over until we learned to call it love." No sender, no fingerprint, just that sentence. Ink faded at the edges, like it had been held too long. Outside the frame of law and fame, the culture shifted, quietly, like a room adjusting to a light that had been on too long. Artists started canceling collaborations. Some execs resigned for health reasons. Labels deleted old footage without prompt. And among the interns and assistants, a new phrase emerged. Not an accusation, just a code. The chair. It didn't need explanation. If you knew, you knew. And if you didn't ask. The real impact wasn't public. It was emotional, psychological, invisible. A slow fracture behind the glass. They called it legacy before, mentorship, family, culture. But those words changed shape after the trial. Because now, every time someone said he changed my life, people leaned in a little closer to hear how. And when someone said we were just kids back then, it didn't sound nostalgic anymore. It sounded like an unfinished sentence. There was no statue erected, no reparation issued, no documentary aired with full disclosures. But there was a ripple, and sometimes ripples reach farther than earthquakes. Because silence isn't always the absence of noise. Sometimes it's the sound of someone finally listening.